Now let's have a look how we can use Visual Studio to enhance the layout of our report. So here I am back again into the development environment. I created a layout with Report Builder. I've closed Report Builder, and now I'm going to go and use Visual Studio to enhance the layout. Now I'm going to use Visual Studio to enhance the layout which was created in Report Builder, but you can also use Visual Studio to create the layout from scratch. In that case, we don't have any wizards that we can use, but we can use the toolbox, in which we also can see our table and matrix. Now in this case, what I am seeing is that I have the layout of my report as it was created with Report Builder. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to show the description of the item. In order to do that, the first thing that we need to activate in Visual Studio is to show our dataset. And you need to do this via the View menu. And then you need to scroll to the bottom, and then you need to activate Report Data. Then actually the Report Data tab will be shown. This is something you always have to do manually every time you're going to open the layout for a report in Visual Studio. Now here you can also see your datasets. You can see the parameters, and you can also see the built-in fields, just like we saw them actually in Report Builder. I can see my matrix, I can see my grouping pane, and here on the right I can see a number of properties. I can go into a text box or a field in a text box. It has properties. If I open here the property box, I can see all of the controls, and I can select them so I can see their names, and if I select them I can also see their properties. In Visual Studio there are different windows that we can visualize. We don't all require them, but for example there is the Solution Explorer which can explain actually what we are doing. Right now we are working on our RDLC file, which is actually our layout file for our report 70,009. So our development environment has sent this to Visual Studio. We are working on it. We're going to make some changes, save it, and then go back into the report dataset designer. Then the application is only going to import the RDLC file. So do not make any modifications to any of these other files, or don't import any other files in here. If you have some experience with Visual Studio, you might be tempted to do so, but the application is only going to import the RDLC file. That's why I never show or require the Solution Explorer. So I would like to include my item in here, or the description of the item. I have it here in the datasets. We have two possibilities. I can select it and I can drag it into my matrix here, for example, to the right. And then you will notice that besides the number of the item, we now have the description. It's also added here as a row group. Now actually, because this is a matrix, the item is added as a grouping. I don't really like to group on a textual value, so instead of doing this, I'm going to undo this. As you can see, we have an undo action in here. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to make the item a little bit wider. I'm going to select the text box that displays the item. Then I have two possibilities. Either I can, for example, click in here and I can type in something, or I can right-click on this text box and I will go into the expression. This is actually going to open the expression designer for the value of this text box. If I do that, you will notice that at this moment, the value for the number of the item is shown. Let me zoom in here to have a closer look at the expression. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate this. So I'm also going to use, for example, in this case, the description. So I'm going to my dataset fields. I will select my description, double click, and it will be added in here. What I usually do is I would like to start with the description. So in this case, I'm going to change the expression a little bit. I will go into the beginning, I will paste my description, then I will use the ampersand sign to concatenate the two fields, and I would like to have a space in between them. So I'm going to use another ampersand sign, and then in here I need to add my space, which is going to happen with the two double quotes. Double quotes are actually used for strings. So this actually space which is going to be shown, and I'm going to show the description and then the number fields. This description, or the result of this expression, is going to be used for the value property of this text box. as soon as we do this, you can see that here it says EXPR, which is actually expression. So okay, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to save this layout, and then I will minimize Visual Studio. I will go back into the dataset, click on a line which is not selected, import the layout, save it again. I'm going to do it 2 times, so the application will pick it up more quickly. I will run the report again, and when I'm going to run the report, you're going to see that the modification that I did in Visual Studio has been picked up. And so now we can see there's a description of the item, we can see the number, and we can see the inventory fields. I'm going to make a few more modifications. So basically I would like to change the sorting. Right now it's still sorted on the number, but it's showing the description first. In order to do that, I will return to Visual Studio, and I'm going to do this here in the group. My information is grouped on item. I will go into the group properties. What you can see is that, okay, the grouping is on item, but the sorting can be completely different. And what am I going to do? I'm going to select another field from the dataset on which to sort. As you can see, I can sort on any of the fields that come from the dataset. I can also create an expression to create a more dynamic sorting. Okay, so now I've changed the sorting. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the formatting. What can I do? I can select one or multiple text boxes with Shift or Control. I can go into the properties, I can sort my properties, and I will go here into the format, and I will say it's numerical with 2 decimals, if you know the code. If you don't know the code, well, don't worry. What you can do is you can, for example, also select the text box. You can go into the text box properties, and then you can go into the number tab, and here you can select any of the formattings. If you would like to show or hide separators or use regional formatting, you can enable or disable all of these features. Whatever you select is going to result into a format code that's going to be used. You can apply it text box by text box, or on a complete row, on a complete column, or on a set of text boxes that you select. I'm going to save the layout. I'm going to return to my dataset designer, import it again. And then what I'm going to do is I will go here into the ledger entry table, and I'm going to also apply a filter in the data item table view. What am I going to do in here? Well, I'm going to say that I don't want any information to be shown for which the location code is empty. So I'm going to apply a filter. I'm going to say that it needs to be different from the empty value. And then I'm going to use my single quotes in order to do that. I'm going to save this and do it 2 times, run the report again. And now we are going to see some differences in the layouts. As we can see, there is actually no empty location anymore. I can see the information sorted here on the description of the item, and I can see the inventory by location, and on the right I'm also able to see my totals. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, and I also have the possibility to export my reports. Let me go back into Visual Studio to show you a couple of more things. Why is Visual Studio interesting to use? Well, we have a lot of toolbars. If you go here into the View menu, you can enable or disable some toolbars that can assist you. For example, when you're working with text boxes and you would like to give them a different font or a different color. We have lots of text boxes from which we can choose. If I'm going to go here and select the text box, you can say, for example, here how you would like the information to be aligned to the right, to the left. I have my bold, italic, underline. I can select a background color. What else can I do? Well, I can, for example, go here into the Format menu. I can change my fonts. I can justify the alignment. And if I have multiple text boxes, let me demonstrate this by just inserting a couple of empty ones. A text box, and then Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V to paste some more text boxes. Now I have these text boxes in here. If you select them, and then you go in, for example, in the format, what you can do is you can give them all the same size, the same width and the same height. You can say the horizontal spacing needs to be made equal. So on a horizontal level, now they have the same equal space. Then, for example, I can say, okay, the vertical spacing, make it equal. And now they're also going to be aligned differently. And depending on the options that I'm going to select here, you can actually play with these text boxes. And that's going to be very interesting if you are working in a report header and you need to align a lot of controls. Last but not least, what we can also activate is actually called the document outline. The document outline is actually a toolbar which you can find normally here in the Other Windows section. And if you activate it, it will give you an overview on what is available in your report layout. You can see the body, it contains a table, and the table contains your text boxes. It's very important that we have this document outline feature because in a complex report, it will give you a possibility to backwards engineer and to have a look at what is actually available in the layout of your reports. So let's summarize how we can make use of Visual Studio in our presentation. So there are some interesting features we have available in Visual Studio regarding report formatting. We have some toolbars and we have the document outline. So for formatting, I'm going to go here into the Format menu. We can format our text boxes. There is the document outline that we can use to have, for example, a look on the complete layout of our report. And there is also, in this case, the possibility to build a website. I'm going to demonstrate this in a few seconds. And we have a lot of toolbars that we can activate and we can use that to format information. Now let me come back to this building thing. What happens if something goes wrong? Well, usually if you're going to work in the application, we just go to the application. If I make a mistake, for example, I'm going to make an error here in my layouts. So I'm going to type in something. Let me just undo this, and what am I going to do? I'm going to select some text in here. I'm going to make a typing mistake. That can happen. If I'm going to save my report in Visual Studio or in Report Builder, no problem. If I'm going to go back here into the report design, click on an item and click on yes, no problem, the error is not detected. But if I'm going to save, then the system is going to detect and display the error. But that's a lot of steps to perform in order to detect the error. So, and that is something that we can shortcut in Visual Studio. If you go, for example, into the Build menu, what we can do is we can build our solution or we can build a website to detect these errors very quickly. As you can see here in the error window, the same error is detected inside of Visual Studio, and I can solve it in here without having to go back into actually the report dataset designer to fix the error. So that's actually an advantage, or one of the advantages of using Visual Studio, especially for complex reports, and that's very important to have, and we don't have that in Report Builder. So this demonstrates how we can create or enhance a layout in Visual Studio. Remember, you can also start to develop the report from scratch in Visual Studio, but then we don't have the wizards that we can use to start from.